Very happy tonight to have with me in this Zoom interview a very good friend of mine, Anthony Prince. And he has consented to join me tonight to have a discussion on what is happening in the field of health, especially with the development of so many new diseases, pestilences. And we want to set the background for this discussion by looking at something which occurs in the Bible itself, Matthew chapter 24 and verse 7, where Jesus in his apocalypse makes the following point. He said, "For nations shall rise against nations, and kindreds against kindreds, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places." Now, when people read things like that, they always associate the development of disease and war with the end of the world. Now, tonight we don't propose to deal too much with wars and famines, but we certainly want to talk about pestilences because we are in an era where we are seeing some very new diseases developing. Plus, we're also seeing the re-emergence of some old diseases. So tonight, Mr. Anthony Prince has joined me to discuss this issue of why is it at this time we are seeing the re-emergence of many of the diseases which we thought we would have conquered in the past. Plus, why are we seeing the emergence now of some new diseases? Now, just to set the stage for the discussion, in 1918, the world experienced one of the worst pandemics the world has ever seen. It's referred to as the Spanish flu, and experts claim that the Spanish flu may have killed as many as between 20 to 50 million people. Now, that was in 1980. Then, as we moved a little further down in the 20th century, in 1957, there was an outbreak of H2N2 Asian flu, and that particular flu killed approximately 1.1 million people worldwide. Then, as we move from the decade of the 50s and then into the decade of the 60s, there was another outbreak. This time it was H3N3, another influenza strain. And this strain of influenza impacted over 1 million people worldwide. Then as we come down to 2003, we had the SARS epidemic, severe acute respiratory syndrome, that affected thousands of people across Asia. Then as we come over to 2009, we had a new form of H1N1 which emerged and affected a number of people in Mexico. There were confirmed cases in 214 countries and approximately 18,500 deaths. Then that brings us to what is happening now. In 2019, the novel coronavirus emerged in Wuhan and has spread to some 212 countries. Now, to date, as I check, there are about approximately 3,127,951 infections, plus there are 216,987 deaths so far. Right now in the US, there are over 1 million infections with 58,644 recorded deaths. So that's just to give us an overview of what has been happening since Spanish flu to now, which is about 100-year period. And so to begin the discussion tonight, I'd like us first of all to think about what are some of the factors do you think, Brother Prince, that may be contributing to the re-emergence of some of the old diseases and the emergence of some of these new diseases like the novel coronavirus and the N1 strain of influenza that we've seen developing over the past 100 years.
Okay, I want to say good night to everyone, and indeed, I'm very happy that you would have invited me. Now, I think undoubtedly, when we look at the history and we look at what is happening, it seems to me that man is partly responsible for many of the things that we are seeing happening.
Mm-hmm.
Now, man, as technology advanced, we begin to see that technology brought changes that may be for progress, but it also brought diseases and all sorts of things that people start to suffer from.
Mm-hmm.
You see, man's experimentation, science has been experimenting. That has been another problem. We
Mm-hmm.
see, in particular, when we go to the whole area of people dealing with genes, how interfering with gene structures has caused persons to be more susceptible to cancer and all these things. Another thing that we see clearly is that as technology came into play, a man began to realize that there were certain metals that he could now use and that were important for what he was trying to do. In the production of these metals at some point in time had side effects that caused diseases. For example, when we look at lead, man realized that lead was useful in the telecommunication business. But after many, many years, they then began to realize that lead was causing problems with women who were pregnant. We look at the asbestos. Asbestos was important in the construction of ships. And we know in particular during the Second World War period that because man was using asbestos, not only the ships for roofs or bricks, etc., they began to realize that one of the things that man got from asbestos was asbestosis. So we see even from the advent of the Industrial Revolution, we began to see that as technology came in and it was started to be used, that a lot of things came off the technology. The other thing that we see now, the re-emergence of some of these diseases that we thought that were eliminated. We've recognized that as man made and discovered medications for the diseases and that they were being used over a period of time, at a point in time, the diseases mutated and became resistant to the drugs that they've had. So that is why we've got things like gonorrhea and syphilis and tuberculosis turning back up in a more, let me say, vicious form, and that the modern medications are unable to deal with it. So,
okay, no, I'm glad you mentioned some of those older diseases like tuberculosis. We could think in terms of cholera and smallpox. Now, to the best of my knowledge, smallpox is perhaps one of the only diseases that mankind can fully say he has eradicated. And the eradication of smallpox largely had to do with vaccination. Now, you've also had a number of other diseases that mankind has attempted to eradicate, and this has also been connected to vaccination programs. Now, do you think the anti-vaccination movement, which has become so prominent in our time, do you think this has had any impact on the re-emergence of some of these older diseases?
I think so. My reason for saying so is that if you have a group who are against vaccines and they're trying to educate people out, these vaccines are not good. For example, we know what happened, I think, in Pakistan, India, and Afghanistan, where the Taliban were stating that the vaccines given, I think it was for polio, etc., were a ploy of the West to destroy the people. So the people, through intimidation and then through false news, refused to take them. So what has happened? It has come back with a vengeance. So I think that people need to be properly educated. The problem is that people are so good at putting over their presentations that people are swallowing some of these things. People would not investigate for themselves. So therefore, I think these people, you know, are creating a serious problem in the world.
Okay, now I'm
Have
going
a
to
good
play.
tell me,
I'm
look,
going to play devil's
this
advocate.
vaccine is
Just
gonna
hold a
have
moment. Just hold a moment, brother Prince. I'm going to play devil's advocate here somewhat, and throw in this particular question. Now, we know that racism is a very real part of the experience of Black people. And we know also that there have been efforts to some extent, prevent the growth and the spread of the Black population globally. If you look at some of the efforts that have been made, you see that because of the strategies which have been put in place in North America, for example, we find Black people experiencing some of the poorest health. We find them perhaps not being able to get good medical attention. And what a lot of people say is that a lot of these racist policies help to decimate Black populations, both in the diaspora as well as in Africa. So one can basically understand then the fears that some Africans and some Blacks in the diaspora would have when you have white organizations come in and saying they are vaccinating people, because there could be somewhere in there in the mind of some racist person the concept of using vaccination as a tool for sterilization. Do you think there's perhaps any validity in this fear among Africans and Black people within the diaspora?
well, yes, undoubtedly yes. Because when we look at what has happened to Black people, we really have to look at the United States, where we know, for example, that in the United States, I can't remember the exact year, they carried out experiments. So they took Black people who, and they had syphilis, or they injected syphilis into them,
Okay.
told them that they were only checking their blood, etc. They took white people, but the quote unquote, the white people were given treatment. But the doctors said, and this is on record, the only time we want to see that person is when they're dead. That is only of use. We've seen basically, let me look. We've seen the Native American population who were decimated by smallpox and all sorts of things that were deliberately put among them to decimate their populations. We look at Africa. For example, we know in Africa, in Nigeria, and those places, that a lot of toxic chemicals, etc., were put in the forest, and now they're leaking, and Black people are suffering.
Well,
And then we know because
in all fairness to the Europeans when they came to the New World, when they came to the New World, they came with European diseases that the Indians in the New World had no defense against, smallpox being one of them. Right. So you had a situation where these new diseases, which were introduced into the New World, decimated the African population. Of course, people would say that that was not deliberate on the part of the Europeans. It is just something that happened when you had one population going into an area that is new. The locals may not be able then to deal with these new diseases that the new population brings in. Okay, let's move the discussion on a little bit more. Now, just today, I think somewhere one of the news services made mention of the fact that the president of the US has declared meat, producing plants, to be an essential service. And so he is trying to tell people that these plants need to remain open so as to make sure that the food production chain where meat is concerned in North America is not disrupted. Now, it is now known that there are many viruses circulating in the bodies of many of the animals that we have around us. Some of perhaps the worst offenders are bats, pigs, chickens, horses, and even camels. All of these animals, which are very useful to human beings, have been implicated in the spread of diseases and pandemics. So something that I would like us to explore in this discussion. The mere fact that we know that viruses exist in animals, some of the animals that we are very dependent on, should this knowledge dictate to us that we ought to be very careful in terms of how we expose and interact with animals that we have around us in our local environment? Chickens, pigs, camels.
Undoubtedly, yes. Huh? I'm even going to go further. Not only how we interact, etc. I think anybody now who is seeing what is going on must seriously look at what they're eating. So we may even have to consider the elimination of flesh foods from our diet, because there is a clear link of transmission from animal to man. And when in doubt, you leave it out. So therefore, I think another reason that we're going to have these problems is that as we encroach upon the natural habitats of some of these animals, the animals have no choice but to come among us. Like here in Barbados, the monkeys' habitat is being destroyed. So they're all now within housing areas, etc. Now, let's say a monkey has rabies or whatsoever. The problems that we're going to be faced is that since we destroy the habitat of the animals and they come in closer contact with us, there can be a transmission of diseases that they have to human beings. Right. So that is one of the big problems that we face.
And of course, as populations increase, the demand for food also increases. And so as happened in China, where people started developing farms for wild animals, bears and all kinds of animals, Chinese started farming as a way of getting meat. As populations increase, obviously the demand for food is going to increase. And people may be tempted to put on their plate things that traditionally they may not have been accustomed to. Like, for example, we have the green monkey here in Barbados. There's a growing population of green monkeys, as we can observe. And it is quite possible that down the line, the demand for food may push some people in the direction of eating monkeys in Barbados as well. And I'm almost certain that it is happening already in some places. So do you see this as a big danger to people?
It is a danger, but there's something very significant and outstanding about what you're saying. You've mentioned a whole set of animals, bats and snakes, etc. One may not be a Christian who may be listening, but basically when one goes into the Bible, these very said animals were forbidden to be eaten by man, right? Even when we had mad cow disease was an interference, right? An interference of scientists who would have brought the spores from Africa and New Guinea and brought them into England and the United States, and they transmitted it. But in reality, when you look at these so-called exotic animals, primarily they're not, and even doctors and other people are saying they're not really fit food for human consumption. But the world has reached such a point. The world has reached such a point that they want exotic things.
Yes, on that score, I was looking at a news story recently where some of the creme de la creme of American society, they were going to this special culinary exhibition where people were eating spiders and all kinds of interesting animals, insects. They were cooked and people were eating them and enjoying them. There are also some restaurants that specialize in wild game. So you can go to some restaurants and get alligator meat or, whatever kind of meat you desire. There are people who are actually into that. And I'm not talking now about people, the Aborigines in Australia.
United States and England and all.
Cultured people in the West. So maybe we do have a big problem. Now, we just mentioned the idea about the population explosion. And one of the things that has come with the population explosion is the movement of people away from farms to cities. So we have the whole process of urbanization. some of the largest cities to be found in the world, the mega cities. And a mega city basically would be a city with more than 10 million people. I think that's the definition they give for a mega city. Take, for example, Mumbai in India. Mumbai has maybe about in excess of 20 million people. Now, not only does Mumbai have a very large population, but surrounding Mumbai, you have slum areas. And you have the slums around Mumbai, and then you have slums within Mumbai itself. And it has been estimated that could be as much as half of the population of Mumbai live in these slum areas. Now, if you know anything about a slum area, you would know that it is an area of very high population density. You would know it is also an area that has very poor sanitation. Perhaps the running water is not readily available. You may not have good medical facilities. So my next question has to do with urbanization and how it is impacting on the spread of disease. Do people in cities and in the slums surrounding these cities and within these cities have a lot to fear as we go into this era where we're seeing the rise of these pandemics, very contagious diseases spreading among people? Do city dwellers have something to be very concerned about?
Of course. First of all, when we look at the cities are compact societies. People are living close, etc. For example, in Italy was a problem where people are living extremely close. You've already mentioned some factors that add to diseases, but so contact is inevitable. It is difficult to, for example, social distance, etc. And if you look at the situation very carefully, even in great countries like the United States, who is unable to deal with some even smaller cities. What about a city that has in 20 or 25 million people, right? So it is going to be a problem. The problem that you're going to face in a democratic country is that the methods that a communist country may employ, a democratic country cannot employ, or if they attempt to employ it, there's going to be civil unrest. We see how people came out in the United States screaming and shouting. They want the nails done, they want their hair cut, they want all these things that are not really necessary. But the problem that you're going to have, one, is that
politically since the removal of Mugabe. Things have not really changed very much. Zimbabwe, the health service, recently the doctors were on strike. So Zimbabwe has some very serious economic problems. And now you have a situation where governments in Southern Africa have basically sent back some 15,000 Zimbabweans across the border back into Zimbabwe. And the unfortunate thing is that I doubt very much that these people were tested. I doubt very much that people were screened to see if any of them were basically infected by COVID. Do you find this to be a humane thing for countries right now to be exiling or pushing civilians from their country back into another country?
It cannot be, but don't forget that the claim, which may have some justifiable right in far as the claim is concerned, but not the action, is that they are unable to look after these folks. But not only Zimbabwe, I was appalled that when he was looking at the treatment of Africans in Israel. You know, that is one that the world needs to look at. You've got people, they can't get, they're not entitled to the health services. They're the people who have the lowest jobs and in the areas of waitresses and these sorts of things, and they're not working anymore. So when they're sick, they can't go to the health institutions. You've got some of them now in internment camps and they're being fed slop, right? And you're forcing them out of the country. Further from forcing some out of the countries that they flee, one of the other problems that we face, although we're dealing with diseases, is that if some of them go back to the countries that they flee, their lives are at stake. So when we look at it very carefully, one begin to see that where you've got this air, what we call of nationalism, that is, it is me and my own. So we don't look at nobody else. So all of this is causing really and truly mankind seems to have lost any sort of compassion and love for his fellow brother. So it is really a very serious situation that will multiply more and more and more because it is being fueled. It is being fueled by extremists and by all sorts of people who have their own agendas. And unfortunately, the quickest solution that these people are finding, I'm going to use the Bayesian parlance, pack the back where they came from. We're going to send, which means we're going to send them back where they came from.
Very unfortunate development indeed. Now,
so
now, when you look at the fatality statistics in North America, one thing that became evident very, very early as they started gathering statistics about who was dying from COVID-19, it quickly emerged that African Americans were disproportionately represented among the dead in North America. Now, what are some of the special concerns that Black people should have as they approach this particular pandemic, COVID-19? Are there special concerns for Black people in this pandemic?
There must be special concerns for Black people because one only has to look, one only has to look to see what is happening. Now, let us look at what just transpired. You've got an area, right? The area is heavily Black. So what have you done? You have opened back the saloons, as I've said, the barber shops, and all these things that are not necessary, primarily in a Black area. Primarily in a Black area. And Black people must be conscious that they must not let a government think for them. They must not let their bellies and those things that are necessary direct their actions. One has to look at the multiplicity effect of what they're going to do. Is it important, I must ask you, my brother, that I have to go to a barber on conditions like this? Is it important that I have to go and get my nails polished? Is it important that I have to get a massage? And unfortunately, for some reason, it boggles my mind that a Black person would want to leave his home where you've got such a high percentage of African Americans, and in particular men, because the majority are men. One must get to what if some of these so-called conspiracy theories may not have the truth in them, that they're looking to eradicate African men, but primarily African men are dying.
But wouldn't you say that to some extent black people may be playing into the trap by going out and reopening or going to the salons? I mean, even though the governor of Georgia gave the okay for them to do these things, there was no law saying that they had to reopen. But you would notice that the international media did do a coverage, and they looked at the response of both black and white. And you were able to see that there were some black barbershops and black businesses which are not considered essential that were open. And another interesting thing I observed as I looked at the news was the representation of black people among the anti-lockdown protesters in various cities around the US. When they were showing the crowds, I specifically looked to see how many black people I saw in the crowd, and in quite a few instances, I was able to pick out black people. So I'm just wondering, do you think black people are conscious of the fact that a lot of these policies could be racist at their core, and by playing along, black people may be working against their own self-interest?
But this is one that I have to agree with you on, because for me, I believe that some of these actions are one of expediency. They've been implemented to have a sinister purpose, a sinister end. And I think that as a people, right, as I said previously, we must begin to think for ourselves. We must not only begin to think of what is going to happen now, we must also think what is going to happen tomorrow. So we must think very, very carefully, because all of the experts are saying, my brother, that there will be a second wave. So you go out there, and again, let's look at it. I think that, yes, the economy has to, you've got to find ways to start the economy. But at this present time, where you have deaths that are one stage determined, I'm going to let a couple more thousand people die. Am I going to let people go there and maybe increase the amount that are going to die? So one, outside of making political decisions, one also must make decisions that has some morality to it, ones that have human principles in that. It may be difficult, right? It may be difficult. That is why, listen to me carefully, we must look at when people make decisions, who are the people making decisions, what is the history of the people making decisions, and how it is going to impact on us, those decisions that have been made. People can make decisions, but as you rightly said, they can't force us. They can't force us to go out into the streets. And I'm a bit disappointed where I could have seen people who were black and understanding the whole climate. In particular sense, you had a particular government in place who was clearly demonstrated how they're thinking. And we see some very sinister things that are happening. And as a people, right? As a people, we must be able to see, to analyze, to decide, and to pass on that information. But sad to say, some of our people seem to have forgotten who they are, seem to have forgotten their history, seem to have forgotten what is the aims and objectives of certain people. And in that way, they have fallen, they have been caught, hook, line, and sinker.
Okay. Now, in all fairness and to be balanced in our approach to this crisis, the whole idea of the return to normalcy is predicated on the discovery of a vaccine that can be distributed widely so people can be vaccinated against this particular strain of the coronavirus so that people can get back into the work environment. Now, all of the experts seem to be saying that that solution is quite a way off. Some are saying 12 months, some are saying 18 months. So it is clear that countries cannot wait 12 or 18 months before they reopen. So there has to be a strategy that would allow countries to get some economic activity going again, but at the same time not endanger their populations. Are you hearing me? Are you hearing me, Prince?
Having problems with you.
But you're hearing me now.
I'm hearing you now, yes.
Good. So the question I'm asking is, how do you strike the balance between protecting your citizens from a contagious disease that is killing people, and the whole idea that until you find a vaccine, you have to still allow people to live and to work. So what are some of the guidelines do you think that need to be put in place to make sure that people can get back to some form of economic activity, but at the same time still be as safe as possible?
Well, first of all, people must realize this, and some people seem not to have realized it. These are not normal times. I want to repeat, these are not normal times. These are times that call for discipline, that call for sacrifice, that call for tolerance. Now, it is clear that if something is not done, many countries, the economies may collapse, like ours. So, but I'm saying that if you're looking to put people back to work, look at the particular areas where you can lessen contact. For example, I was only hearing this evening that the Honorable Prime Minister of Jamaica opened back that the construction industry can go back to work.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying that when you're looking at it, you've got to look at these particular areas, one, where people can work, but yet still it still gives them the opportunity to work at distances, in most cases at distances. So to me, those are the first priorities that you need to look at the particular industries where people can work. But you can enforce the social distancing. The first priority. And as you continue to look at it, you know, we must also understand that there are some places where the whole staff can't go back to work. For example, people who work in the office that may have been working 3 or 4 feet apart, the whole office can't go back to work.
Okay.
So therefore, if you get some of the people to work, it means that the government will have a needs, and if they were giving out $20 million in food packages a month, it may come down to 10. So there's still a strain. But remember that these are not normal times, and as you said, right, things will not go back to normal. The world will never be the same again.
Okay, so there has to be balance in terms of how we approach this issue. At the same time, trying to guarantee the safety of citizens within a particular country, but also allowing for some kind of economic activity, especially in areas where people can practice social distancing and the other good practices. Now, this pretty much brings us down to the end of our discussion. And the final question I want us to address is the whole idea of what lessons we can learn as a community here in the Caribbean. What lesson can people in Africa, what lesson can people in the diaspora learn from this COVID-19 pandemic? What do you think are some of the important lessons that we can take away from this pandemic?
Now, I think one of the big lessons for the Caribbean is that we must learn to be able to produce what we eat. We've got the space in Guyana and those places. We must learn to produce what we eat. We have an example, listen to me carefully, where several Caribbean countries had ordered equipment to deal with the COVID, respirators, etc. But because the big country was in need of respirators also, places like the Caribbean were discounted. No, they can't go be seizing these respirators. What will happen if there is a food crisis? Suppose now you don't get people these Mexicans, etc., in North America, and the people from the European Union to go to England to pick food, there will be a food shortage. Do you believe, based on what we've seen, that people will be prepared to ship their food down here? We see an example in India where this whole thing that people were dealing with lupus, that India decided we're not going to export, is only because that the United States has might and the power. When Trump said that if you don't export, we can put embargoes. We don't have any of those things that we can use. So that's the first one. We must now relook our whole agricultural plan. Two, we begin to see, right, that in a crisis, that things will happen that you never planned for. So crises are unexpected. We see that in a crisis that will be left in our own. So outside of that, we need Caribbean unity. We also need, right, our people need to be taught that we must not waste. I am sure that there are many people who will eat 3 and 4 meals a day. You don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. So we must be a more disciplined people. We must be a people who employ temperance in all the things that we do. We must also be a people who must be prepared to help our brothers and our sisters. We must reach to the point where we know, for example, now, the thing now is food. So we must learn from this that we must be able to share. We've got to make sure that as a Black people, as a Negro race, right, that we can't have 6 pounds of yams or in our house and our brother don't have any and we hoarding. We've also begun to learn that in crises like this, we see it here in our island of Barbados, that from the time that you heard that things were happening, people begin to hoard. So one of the other lessons that we must learn is that sometimes instead of spending money on things that are not important, we must learn to economize, right? How you spend your money dictates how you live your life. So therefore, when we're going to the supermarket, we must plan better. Wherever possible, you know, if I used to buy a pound of rice and can't afford it, I buy a pound and a half and always keep something for that unexpected time. Because we've recognized now that when push come to shove, I hope that whole listener will understand, every man jack for himself.
Everybody have to basically fend for themselves. Well, Mr. Anthony Prince, I would like to thank you very much for sharing your insights on this very intriguing topic of why we're seeing the spread of so many diseases, some of which we thought we had conquered, and some new ones. As we've said in this discussion, there are a number of things that we are doing that may be exposing us to these viruses as we encroach on the territory of animals, as we start using more of these wild animals for food. This may be a factor. Another factor, the urbanization, the whole specter of war. All of these factors are coming together to create a perfect storm, which has now broken on the world. And as we wait to see what will happen in the next 12 to 18 months, indeed, we are going to have to do a serious rethink about what it means to be living on this planet in this particular time. Thank you very much, Brother Prince, for sharing your thoughts. And I would like to wish you and your family the very best as we continue to navigate these serious times in which we live. Any last words?
Yes, I want to thank you for having me on the program. Certainly, it was a joy. But I want to say this in closing, huh? If we obey, if we cooperate, and if we sacrifice, we can get through this. But it takes every man to play his part. Thank you. God bless. And until next time.
Thank you very much, Brother Prince. Thank you for watching, liking, and subscribing to this channel. Feel free to visit my author page at
amazon.com/author/Leonard Phillips and browse my fiction and non-fiction titles. Your purchases and reviews would be greatly appreciated. Asante sana na teonene tina, which is Kish Swahili for thank you and see you soon.